Good day to everyone out there, and I hope you're doing fine today. Welcome to 15-Minute Free Thinking, the podcast. And today, I'm going to talk about a subject that, well, let's just say I was a little bit reluctant to even tackle. And it wasn't even the subject matter that I really wanted to talk about today. I actually intended on making a video about enlightenment and what is enlightenment. I guess the irony there is that that's another video that I've been putting off for a long time, because as I'm looking at the date on my notes, it's from July of 2019. So it's going on 2 years now since I've actually tackled this that I wanted to. And I have a lot of notes about a lot of subjects, but today something came up that I thought was important. And sometimes I just go on a whim. As usual, today's topic, as well as most topics, are purely my own opinion. Nothing I say is intended to infringe on anybody else's liberties or rights, nor try to convince anyone else of a different way to think. My whole philosophy is to analyze everything around me and come up with a conclusion that makes sense. And talking about socialism and capitalism raises a lot of different isms that people, let's just say, don't take kindly to people who believe different things. So talking about these issues, it's difficult to convince people that most of us are on the same side. First off, socialism, having to do with society. Capitalism, having to do with money or income. This is a very difficult thing to separate. But to lay all the different theories and ideas aside, let's ask one question. Where is all the capital? We talk about capitalism as bringing people up and bringing people out of poverty, which we have done. However, that's been done mostly through mechanization, machinery, the industrial revolution, and now the digital revolution, which is really changing the way we do things. But what we're finding is that the people are not sharing in that wealth. Wage has stagnated when you account for inflation since the 70s. There have been tax breaks for the rich consistently, lobbying and greed by these corporations that basically get whatever they want done. To give you an example, in 2008, the housing crisis, there was a lot involved in that, but a majority of people who suffered losses, could have been easily helped out rather than the corporations, which received a huge bailout, and those bailouts were used to pay CEOs a massive amount of money. Occupy Wall Street is still seen as a bunch of hippies camping in tents by most people. A bunch of people sitting there trying to hold back business. And look, I'm not opposed to growth. I know that without capitalism, we would not have reached the level that we have now as far as innovation and technology. But let's ask ourselves, how much farther can we really go? In the last year, we've had a lot of issues unfold. When the COVID relief package went out the first time, there was a lot of complaints about giving people free money. A lot of complaints by politicians that, well, it'll make people lazy and they won't want to work because they're getting money from the government. What wasn't said is that over 80% of that money that was given was taken by corporations who have the right lawyers and the right systems to get what they want out of it. The winners, as we say, quote unquote winners, do not let go of their power easily. And when people are doing well, they will tell us anything we want to hear. And my question is this: why do we listen to the wealthy? People are enamored by those who are doing better than them or have more power or more wealth. But these people have often completely lost touch with reality. The Pinkertons, I'm sure you've heard of that security agency. It's a security company now. Over a century ago, During the Industrial Revolution, we had people who were fighting for fair wages and a 40-hour work week because they were being overworked and underpaid. So they took to the streets to protest and picket. A group of corporations hired a group of people who called themselves the Pinkertons, because I believe that it was a Pinkerton family who started the group. I'm not sure of the details. But these Pinkertons were sent in to basically shoot and disperse the band of protesters who were protesting for equal and fair wages and hours. And the Americans have been brainwashed by the media for so long into believing that protests are something that shouldn't happen. It's the more you learn about history and over the last 100 years how protests have been quelled and suppressed by so many nations. Now we've convinced ourselves that our neighbors' voices don't need to be heard. 40 years ago, we had over 50 different companies that ran all the different media stations, including the news, reports, newspapers. 50 different companies 40 years ago. Today, in 2021, that has been reduced to 5 companies. We are at 10% of the ownership we once were, and we're talking, companies like Disney and a couple others that you probably haven't heard of. I don't want to go into the details of who owns what and how they sway public view. But the one thing I do want to point out here is that the liberal and conservative is the same game. It's this illusion of choice, that there's 2 herds really of battling sheep, even though they're all the same herd. We are the people. Socialism as a term, it used to mean, forcing, let's say there are a lot of people out there who want to squeeze labor for every penny. And there are those same people who will tell you that socialism means that people want to distribute all the dollars equally, and that even if you work harder, you get nothing. And at one time, that may have, people may have bought that. But we know that's not true. Socialism, just like capitalism, has many different facets and different types. We live in a socialist/capitalist democracy/republic. People are way too caught up on the terms. Here's the thing. If a nation is productive and the people are fed and they feel like they matter, they feel like they're taken care of, then they will take care of each other and things will improve for everyone. And over the last several hundred years, humans have wrestled with innovation to create a life where we can all live like kings. And in a way, we have attained that. The average American eats better than a king 500 years ago because we have all the food that we need. But there are still people who don't. And to get into the details of starvation, the numbers I've looked at, it would cost $33 billion a year. Over a 10-year period, it would cost $331 billion to make sure that everyone on Earth is taken care of and fed. If you look at the numbers that are spent on military in just 1 year, it exceeds that by so much that it would just make you cringe. We don't care as a whole about the world, about our neighbors, about people who are suffering, because it directly conflicts with making a dollar through capitalism. Think of it this way. If a household member suffers, then the whole household suffers. If one person is sick, or one person has a mental disorder, or one person is lost or missing, the whole family suffers. We've managed to shut ourselves out from one another by assuming that, well, this person's from either not just a different family, but a different culture, a different race, or a different country. Do we need a ruling class to tell us what's right and wrong? No, we don't. Do we need presidents? Do we need ministers and, people to sit here and tell us what is cool, what is not, what is right, what is wrong, what's important, what's garbage? No, we absolutely do not. We've been convinced of that for so long that people still believe it. And the problem here is what we have is not capitalism anyway. It's a crony capitalism. The warning of capitalism is that it leads to consolidation, and it can't go on forever. Growth cannot continue forever. The earth is only so big. But on top of that, even if it was working properly, it might function. But innovation has been stifled for so long. Small companies wanting to start up have so many hurdles to jump. They have so many licenses and permit fees in order to start their own business, which are easily dealt with by larger corporations which have the means, the lawyers, and the assistants to do these things. But here's where it gets interesting. If the U.S. truly believed that capitalism was the solution to everyone's problems, then why are we so scared of socialism in other countries? Now, there are problems with socialism. I will not deny that. And if it's improperly implemented, the same problems can happen. The leaders can take charge and dominate the financial market. They can leave the people to poverty and live in lavish hotels and take flights everywhere and have, gold everything, which happens a lot in the Middle East. The thing is, this happens also in Washington, D.C. Our leaders have been wasting our money for a long time. And we completely support abuse of power, which is why we support Saudi Arabia. But it's more complicated than that because it's strategic oil reserves and profits to be made in the Middle East off of rare earth elements, jewels, everything you can imagine. So if the U.S. cannot deal with the problems we have, we kill people. Before I get into the military aspect, I'd like to say a few things. When people talk about how jobs are doing well in America and we are extremely innovative and the job market's picking up, they don't realize that 30% of the new jobs, 30% of all jobs now, from what I read, are gig jobs, the gig economy, which means you have no insurance, you have no recourse with your employer, you get no vacation pay, you get no any types of bonuses or health care, which is really to be expected considering even when you do have a good business you work for, a good corporation, we in the U.S. don't pay maternity leave. We are the only industrialized nation that does not pay maternity leave to women to care for children. It's always been about the money. But the thing is, we don't all benefit from it. It is socialism for the rich. Corporate tax breaks like with Amazon. If I'm not mistaken, I believe I read Jeff Bezos makes $130 million a day, I believe. It's an outrageous amount of money. And if he took 1/10 of his fortune, he could easily deal with world hunger. And to think that any one person has that much power, it's pretty ludicrous. We've constantly been told that there's something called a trickle-down economy. This is Reaganomics, or Reagan economics, where, we were told that if you just let the corporations flourish, everybody will benefit. And then the media, which is, as I said, owned by 5 conglomerates, they feed this world domination. And then they continue to support things like the 2008 bailout, where capitalism completely failed the people. And there has to be an end. Here's the interesting part. Many of the companies who were bailed out in 2008 and during the COVID crisis were companies that were already failing horribly. Like Boeing was having all kinds of problems. Many of these corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations, were really suffering financially before COVID and before the 2008 crisis. But they managed to fake it and pretend like it was COVID that damaged their income. The average person gets nothing. Once again, the corporations get bailed out. And you know what the worst part of this is? The money that they did receive, it wasn't even used to pay the employees or the wages or to make sure that their employees are taken care of, nor even improve upon their services. They were used in stock buybacks and dividends. And if you're not aware of what a stock buyback is, you definitely should look into that. There are some companies and entire industries that every year spend more money than they make. They will even borrow money on top of their own profits. The restaurant industry did this a couple of years ago, to buy back their own stocks in order to make profit when they go up again. These are not the signs of a suffering company. If a company can spend their entire profits buying their own stock, there's something really missing from the picture here. And it's not that the problem itself exists, it's that so many Americans actually support this shit. And this is why capitalism and socialism relates directly to the CIA, the military, and corporate greed, as well as the media. You don't hear the important issues on the media. You know, politics are like talking about death or illness. You know, they suck. But so many people are so hypersensitive that it makes people a lot of money. So the government, these corporations, lobby the U.S. government to defend their interests. And if they can't make it happen in the United States, they make it happen elsewhere. Like what's happening in Yemen right now is nothing more than strategy between countries to try to dominate land. We are bombing grain silos, we have fuel blockades, and then the U.S. is saying, well, we're not stopping food. But the truth is, without fuel, you can't transport food. And the experts are saying that over 400,000 children have the potential to starve during this incident. But besides the fact that the Houthis are supported by Iran, we have several different countries over there. It's a shadow war. We're bombing hospitals. I should say our supported country, Saudi Arabia, which they buy more arms than any other. You should know this. They buy more arms than any other country in the world right now. And we support most of them. And if not all of them, and train their people how to use them. And we also sell them cluster bombs, which are considered illegal in international treaties and warfare. Yet we're selling weapons that are illegal in our own country for us to use. We sell them F-15s, and the U.S. military refuels Saudi fighter planes while they're in transit to go bomb these civilians, which we know they've been bombing hospitals, they've been bombing schools, they've been bombing warehouses. They want to completely destroy the industry and everything they have. In 2016, if you look back, they had already lost in Yemen something around 10,000 people and displaced 2 million people. That 10,000 people over the last 10 years went to 233,000 dead. And over 130,000 of those were from indirect causes, such as hunger or displacement. And there's 24 million people in this one country in need of assistance, merely because we are playing war games of chess to dominate an industry of oil. And anyone who doubts this has anything to do with oil is completely unaware of the deeper implications of what it means to go into a place like that. When you realize, if you look back at the history of oil, the history of America, our interest in the Middle East, we have always abused our power. So I want to read to you a couple of articles that will better explain and give you the evidence for the different coups that our country has committed upon the world. There are 7 right here that I would like to label out. And I think the best way to discuss this would be to read the actual article. It's off of foreignpolicy.com. And this is 7 coups against other countries that were working towards socialism. For anyone who tells you socialism doesn't work, they're possibly neglecting the fact that the United States has made a concerted effort to diminish, demean, and destroy any particular group that wants to gain agency over their own country, even democratically elected officials. And you may have been told that the United States only overthrows dictators, which is complete bullshit. So, when we go to the Middle East and we talk about why Iran is supporting these Houthi rebels, this is where it all stems from. And I'm going to read this. It's from the foreignpolicy.com. It says, Iran, 1953. Despite continued speculation about the CIA's role in a 1949 coup to install a military government in Syria, the ouster of Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, the earliest coup of the Cold War that the U.S. government has acknowledged, in 1953, after nearly 2 years of Mossadegh's premiership, during which time he challenged the authority of the Shah and nationalized an Iranian oil industry previously operated by British companies, he was forced from office and arrested, spending the rest of his life under house arrest. According to the just declassified CIA-authored history of the operation, it was the potential to leave Iran open to Soviet aggression at a time when the Cold War was at its height and when the U.S. was involved in an undeclared war in Korea against forces supported by the USSR and China. This was only the first, I should say, one in the middle of many coups that had gone on for some time, but one of the earliest recognized from, CIA's own documents. The fact is that the United States did not want Iran to nationalize its oil. So we created a coup and we took out their leader and implemented our own. This is a fact, it's a historical fact, and you have to imagine, if you're a United States citizen, imagine if Iran had done the same thing to the U.S. in the 1960s and you found out that a president was put in there by a foreign government, and ever since your country has been abused and had your resources siphoned away from the people. How would you feel about these countries? The next one is Guatemala, 1954. Though the United States was initially supportive of Guatemalan President Jacobo Arbenz, the State Department felt his rise through the U.S.-trained and armed military would be an asset. The relationship soured as Arbenz attempted a series of land reforms that threatened the holdings of the U.S.-owned United Fruit Company. A coup in 1954 forced Arbenz from power, allowing a succession of juntas in his place. So this is the next one. And, you have the United Fruit Company is just the next in a line of things like the oil company or Standard Oil, which was a conglomerate in the early 20th century. These coups are always to benefit major corporations, and they never benefit the people. And in many of these countries, these people have been brought out of poverty for a long time and are finally making ground. And then a foreign country comes in because they want to dominate their market. It's just like the US and UK and France and other countries which own huge tracts of land in other countries and dominate their fruits and vegetables and everything else for the interests of the West. This happened in the Congo in 1960. We did the same thing in the Dominican Republic in 1961. And this was attempted assassination of the president of Venezuela ended when he was ambushed and killed by armed political dissidents. The claim is that we sent somebody in and basically armed them. This same thing happened in 1963 in Vietnam, in South Vietnam. in Brazil in 1964, in Chile in 1973. Now, I want to read this one. It said, the United States never wanted Salvador Allende, the socialist candidate elected president of Chile in 1970, to assume office. President Richard Nixon told the CIA to, quote, make the Chilean economy scream, unquote. And the agency worked with 3 Chilean groups, each plotting a coup against Allende in 1970. The agency went so far as to provide weapons, but the plans fell apart after the CIA lost confidence in its proxies. U.S. attempts to disrupt the Chilean economy continued until General Augusto Pinochet led a military coup against Allende in 1973. And, once again, we have the CIA involved in overthrowing another country. And to me, this is just absolutely absurd. And what happened with Mossadegh was probably one of the most revealing aspects of the U.S. tyranny. And this is all based on capitalism, and this is why I'm going into this. And I'm going to read this one last article. This is 7 years old. This happened in 2013. The CIA has publicly admitted for the first time that it was behind the notorious 1953 coup against Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. Let me repeat that. Democratically elected Prime Minister. In documents that also show how the British government tried to block the release of information about its own involvement in his overthrow. On the 60th anniversary of an event often invoked by the Iranians as evidence of Western meddling, the U.S. National Security Archive at George Washington University published a series of declassified U.S. documents. The military coup that overthrew Mossadegh in his National Front cabinet was carried out under CIA directions as an act of U.S. foreign policy, conceived and approved at the highest levels of government, reads a previously excised section of CIA internal paper. And I don't want to read the whole thing and bore you, so I'm not going to. I think I've pretty much made the biggest point. The most recent one would be in Bolivia. And here's what you have to know, and here's what's the most important component of this. That this is all a form of corporate welfare. All of the wars that happen, all of the coups that happen by the U.S. military or the United States are, in essence, components of this capitalism and this corporate welfare, protecting the interests of large companies in the U.S. at the cost of not just other corporations elsewhere or other oil groups, but of the people who live there. So before I go, I'd like to read you a description, or rather let's just say this is the Wikipedia definition of corporate welfare. It reads, subsidies considered excessive, unwarranted, wasteful, unfair, inefficient, or bought by lobbying are often called corporate welfare. The label of corporate welfare is often used to decry projects advertised as benefiting the general welfare that spend a disproportionate amount of funds on large corporations, and often in uncompetitive or anti-competitive ways. For instance, the United States agricultural subsidies are usually portrayed as helping independent farmers stay afloat. However, the majority of income gained from commodity support programs actually goes to large agribusiness corporations such as Archer Daniels Midland, as they own a considerably larger percentage of production. Alan Peters and Peter Fisher, associate professors at the University of Iowa, have estimated that state and local governments provide $40 to $50 billion annually in economic development incentives, which critics characterize as corporate welfare. Some economists consider the 2008 bank bailouts in the United States to be corporate welfare. U.S. politicians have also contended that zero-interest loans from the Federal Reserve System to financial institutions during the global financial crisis were a hidden, backdoor form of corporate welfare. The term gained increased prominence in 2018 when Senator Bernie Sanders introduced a bill singling out Amazon and Walmart in particular to require a company with 500 or more employees to pay the full cost of welfare benefits received by its workers. And that's the final part I'm going to read. I could probably go on and read hours and hours of information, but it would just bore you, and it would bore me. The point I wanted to make is that I feel strongly that capitalism as it's defined has completely failed. Not just us, the people of America, but the rest of the world. Because in order for capitalism to work for us, we have to dominate other cultures. We have to take oil from the Middle East. We have to take jewels from Africa. We have to mine oil from the Amazon and leave all of our shit behind and not follow the same rules, regulations, and laws that we have within our own country because we're not on our own soil. And these same large companies lobby other leaders and other countries to change their regulations to benefit these multinational corporations. If you can pay a foreign leader $1 million to just kind of change a law to benefit you, of course they're going to do it. And the fact that the United States supports and still funds and gives weapons to a country like Saudi Arabia, while at the same time decrying what happened during 9/11, it is a complete slap in the face to all the people. Because almost all those hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. I don't know why people forget this. I don't know why people seem to think that, it's okay as long as our leaders tell us it's okay. But I call bullshit. I call foul. Democracy fails when the people are not properly educated. But capitalism fails when the people don't even have the opportunity. Taxation is a huge component of this. And we're always made to feel like we should be the ones paying the taxes when we have a company like Amazon who paid no federal taxes last year. Think about this. Amazon paid no federal taxes. Jeff Bezos, the guy who makes $130 million a fucking day. The guy who, with 1 day of wages, with 1 year of wages, could solve the fucking the homeless, or the hunger crisis in so many countries. The wealthy are not doing their part, and the workers are suffering because of it, and we call this success. And on top of it, we have leaders, as we call them leaders, rather representatives, who are completely uneducated properly on the issues that they're supposed to be aware of. We have people who are getting paid millions of dollars a year, not just in their own wage, but in kickbacks and subsidies and lobbying, income for their running their campaigns. And this goes for both, left and right wing. And people don't even realize that we used to have dozens of different parties in the U.S. There was a socialist party. There was an anarchist party. Somehow they convince people that we have to decide between A and B. And it's not working. Some will tell you that a democracy is mob rule, and that may be true, but I'm at the point in my life where I believe that mob rule is probably superior to what we have right now, because that works both ways. Right now we have corporate mob rule. We get way too caught up on the terms, the terminology, the words. Socialist, you're a socialist, a communist, a racist. Let go of this shit, and let's talk like adults for a minute, because people are voting for a side, not actual terms of growth. Everybody's marginalized, not just minorities. Special interests always dominate, and groupthink and tribalism seems to dominate the day. Remember that power always creates addiction to more power. Everyone who has it thinks that they know best, what's best for other people and themselves. And if a power vacuum is left, somebody will always fill that role. which is why no matter how many leaders or terrorists you take out, somebody will fill that. And they always have a common enemy as long as there's a meddling United States messing with their business. If the solution was simple, we would have figured it out a long time ago. It isn't. And I'm not saying we shouldn't interfere when others are being harmed by another country or help our neighbors. But going in merely for the sake of corporations, when that is not even being returned to the people, well, if we're ignorant, we'll vote against our own best interests. Thanks for listening. As many of you know, I can't use ad revenue on videos like this, and this is why these topics don't get talked about enough. You can't get any advertisers or sponsors to work with you, so if you would like to support my channel, you can go to my Patreon. It's Carpo719, and I also have a PayPal account, but I appreciate all of you who have donated lately, and I'll be sure and make a note of your name and put you on the list here. Thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. If you're listening to the podcast version, you can go to my YouTube channel or Patreon to leave comments. I will often post a video version of these on YouTube as well, just for my patrons. And for the rest of you, thanks for listening. Be well. Remember to take care of each other. We may not have all the answers in any particular way of thinking, but observation, trial and error, I guess that's all we've got. Peace, my friends. Thanks for coming to Carpo's channel, yo. Yeah.